The morning sun was just rising over Colony 7 when the ground started to shake. Jinwoo felt it first through his bare feet as he stood in his family's small kitchen making breakfast for his little sister. The vibrations started soft like a distant thunder but quickly grew stronger until the dishes on the shelves began to rattle and dance outside. Their simple metal house, the red dust of the planet. Surface began to swirl in strange patterns. Jinwoo dropped the spoon he was holding and ran to the window, pressing his face against the warm glass. His heart started beating faster when he saw what was coming down from the purple morning sky. A massive ship was descending toward their peaceful farming settlement. The vessel was bigger than anything Jinwoo had ever seen before. It was easily the size of 10 houses, put together and made of some kind of dark metal that seemed to absorb the sunlight instead of reflecting it. The ship moved with a grace that seemed impossible for something so large, floating down like a giant feather despite its enormous weight. Thick clouds of red dust exploded outward as the ship touched down in the center of the colony. The landing created a small earthquake that knocked over fence posts and shattered several windows throughout the settlement. Jinwoo watched in amazement and growing fear as the dust clouds slowly settled, revealing the full size of the alien vessel. The ship had no windows that he could see, but it was covered in strange symbols that seemed to glow with their own inner light. Along its sides were weapon ports that looked like the mouths of sleeping dragons. The whole thing radiated a sense of power and danger that made Jinwoo's stomach twist with worry. Behind him, his younger sister Minji stumbled into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She was only 14 but already showed the same stubborn streak that ran in their family. Her long black hair was messy from sleep, and she wore the simple work clothes that all the colonists used. "What is that noise?" she asked, yawning, but her sleepy expression quickly changed to alarm when she saw the worry on her brother's face. She joined him at the window, and her mouth fell open when she saw the alien ship sitting in their town square like a giant metal beast. The ship's cargo bay doors began to open with a sound like thunder. The opening revealed a ramp that extended down to the dusty ground. Inside the ship, Jinwoo could see movement, shadows shifting in the darkness that suggested the presence of many figures. The first being to emerge made Jinwoo's blood run cold. It was clearly not human, standing at least 8 feet tall with scales that gleamed like polished green armor. The creature had a long reptilian head with cold yellow eyes that seemed to glow in the morning light. Its mouth was filled with rows of sharp teeth that caught the sunlight like tiny daggers. This was Commander Vexstar, though Jinwoo did not know his name, yet the alien wore what looked like military armor covered in medals and rank symbols. His presence radiated authority and cruelty in equal measure. As he stepped onto the ramp, his heavy boots rang against the metal. With each step behind the commander came more alien soldiers. Each one was different from the others, representing various species from across the galaxy. There was a tall insect-like being with 4 arms and compound eyes that reflected the light like black mirrors. Another soldier looked like a walking tree, with bark for skin and glowing sap running through visible veins. A third had blue fur and stood on 4 legs like some kind of intelligent Volfall. Of them carried weapons that Jinwoo had never seen before. The guns were sleek and seemed to hum with energy. Small lights along their barrels pulsed in rhythm like heartbeats. These were plasma rifles, though the young colonist had no way of knowing that. They could burn through solid rock or turn a human into ash in seconds. The colonists began emerging from their homes, drawn by curiosity and growing dread. Most of them had never seen aliens before except in old pictures from Earth. The reality was far more frightening than any image could convey. These beings moved with the confidence of predators who had never known defeat. Mayor Hyunwoo was among the first to approach the aliens. The old man had been their leader for almost 20 years, guiding the colony through droughts, failed harvests, and equipment breakdowns. His weathered hands shook slightly as he walked toward the alien commander, but his back remained straight with dignity. Hyunwoo watched as more and more of his neighbors gathered in the square. Farmer Taeyong stood with his wife Naeon, both of them holding their twin babies close to their chest. The elderly couple who ran the general store, Grandmother Suna and Grandfather Minho, supported each other as they walked, their faces pale with fear. The young teacher, Miss Ga, tried to keep her students calm. But Jinwoo could see the terror in her eyes as she counted her charges, making sure none of the children had wandered off. Everyone in the colony knew that first contact with the Galactic Federation usually meant bad news for human settlements. Commander Vextar surveyed the assembled humans with obvious disgust. His forked tongue flicked out of his mouth, tasting the air like a snake searching for prey. When he spoke, his voice was deep and harsh. Like rocks grinding together, the words came through. A small device attached to his armor that translated his alien language into Korean. People of Colony 7, he announced, and every human in the square felt their hearts sink at the formal tone. Your settlement has failed to meet the tribute requirements set by the Galactic Federation. You are now in violation of subsection 47 of the Colonial Management Acta. Mayor stepped forward, his voice steady despite the fear Jinwoo could see in his posture. We have sent everything we could spare. Commander, our crops have been poor this season due to the drought. We barely have enough food for our own families. The alien commander's eyes narrowed to slits, and his mouth curved into what might have been a smile if it wasn't so full of menace. Excuses are not acceptable, human. Your species exists at the pleasure of the Federation. You will provide what is required or face the consequence. Jinwoo felt his sister grab his arm, her fingers digging into his skin through his shirt. He could feel her trembling as the full reality of their situation began to sink in. These aliens had not come to negotiate or help. They had come to take whatever they wanted, and there was nothing the colonists could do to stop them. The Federation soldiers began spreading out through the square, their weapons held ready. Their cold alien eyes examined every human face, cataloging weaknesses and determining threats. Several of them activated small devices that projected holographic displays showing lists of names and numbers. From his position at the window, Jinwoo could see everything that was happening but felt completely helpless. The peaceful life he had known since childhood was ending right before his eyes. The aliens had turned their quiet farming community into a military zone in just a few minutes. As the morning sun climbed higher in the sky, casting longer shadows across the settlement, the young man realized that nothing would ever be the same again. The Federation had come to Colony 7, and with them came a darkness that would test every person in ways they had never imagined possible. The next morning brought horrors that Jinwoo had never imagined possible. The alien soldiers moved through Colony 7 like hungry wolves searching for prey. They kicked down doors without permission and dragged families from their homes to line them up in the gusty streets. Their cold eyes examined each human like they were looking at livestock at a market. Jinwoo hid behind the large grain storage building, watching everything happen through a crack between the metal walls. His heart pounded so hard he was afraid the aliens might hear it. The soldiers carried strange devices that beeped and flashed as they pointed them at different people. The machines seemed to be measuring something about each colonist, though Jinwoo could not understand what. The first person they took was old grandfather Seokmin, who lived alone in a small house near the water well. The elderly man could barely walk without his wooden cane, but that did not matter to the Federation soldiers. Two of the insect-like aliens grabbed his arms and started dragging him toward their ship. Please. Grandfather Seokmin cried out, his voice weak and shaky. I have done nothing wrong. I am too old to cause any trouble. The soldiers ignored his words completely, treating him like he was not even a person. Jinwoo watched in horror as they threw the old man into a metal cage that had been set up near the alien ship. Several other colonists were already trapped inside, including the young couple who ran the bakery and 3 teenagers who had just graduated from school. The cage was barely big enough for all of them to sit down and had no protection from the hot sun. Commander Vextar stood watching the whole process with satisfaction written across his reptilian features. He held a data pad in his clawed hands and made marks on it each time another human was selected for removal. His yellow eyes gleamed with cruel pleasure as families were torn apart right in front of him. The soldiers moved systematically through the colony, taking anyone they considered weak or useless. Grandmother Suna was next, crying and begging as they pulled her away from her husband of 50 years. Her small hands reached desperately toward Grandfather Minho, but the aliens would not let them touch. By noon, the school had become their main target. The alien soldiers surrounded the simple building where Miss Gaa tried to keep her students calm. Inside, Jinwoo could see the young teacher through the windows pressing the children back against the far wall as if a few extra feet might somehow protect them. Lieutenant Crix, the tall insect creature with 4 arms, commanded this operation. His compound eyes could see in all directions at once, making it impossible for anyone to approach without being noticed. He carried a weapon that looked like it could cut through steel, and his movements were quick and precise like a hunting spider. The classroom door exploded inward as the aliens forced their way inside. The children screamed and tried to hide behind their desks, but there was nowhere to go. Miss Ga stepped in front of her students, spreading her arms wide to shield them, even though she was shaking with terror. Move aside, human female. Lieutenant Crix commanded through his translator device. We are here for the children, not you. Step away, and you will not be harmed. I will not you hurt them. Miss Ga replied, her voice stronger than Jinwoo expected. The teacher was barely 25 years old and looked tiny compared to the massive alien soldiers, but she refused to move away from her students. Lieutenant Crix made a sound that might have been laughter in his species. His 4 arms moved to different weapons on his belt as if he was deciding which one to use. The other alien soldiers spread out around the room, blocking every possible escape route. The children were forced to line up in the center of the classroom while the aliens examined them with their scanning devices. Some of the younger ones were crying so hard they could barely stand. Others tried to be brave, but Jinwoo could see the terror in their eyes. Even from his hiding place among the students was his 8-year-old cousin, Sunho, the son of his mother's sister who had died in a farming accident 2 years ago. The little boy had been living with Jinwoo's family ever since and was like a younger brother to him. Sunho was small for his age and often got sick during the cold season. Commander Vexstar entered the classroom, and immediately his presence made the room feel smaller and more dangerous. The alien commander towered over even the tallest child, his armored boots making heavy sounds on the floor with each step. His cold yellow eyes moved from child to child, like he was selecting fruit at a market. The scanning continued as the aliens sorted the children into different groups. Some were pushed to the left side of the room, while others were moved to the right. Jinwoo realized with growing horror that they were deciding which children were strong enough to be useful and which ones would be discarded. When the scanner pointed at Sunho, it made a different sound than it had for the other children. The little boy stood frozen with fear, his legs shaking so badly he could barely remain upright. Tears streamed down his dirt-covered face, and his small hands were clenched into fists at his sides. Commander Vexstar leaned down to examine Sunho more closely. His massive head moved side to side as he studied the frightened child. The alien's forked tongue flicked out, tasting the fear in the air around the boy. His clawed hand reached out and lifted Sunho's chin, forcing the child to look directly into those terrible yellow eyes. This one is defective, the commander announced to his soldiers. He is too small and weak to be of any use. The genetic markers show poor development and limited potential. Sunho tried to step backward, but there was nowhere to go. The other children watched in terrified silence as Commander Vexstar straightened to his full height. His armored right hand rose high above his head, and Jinwoo realized with sick certainty what was about to happen. The slap echoed through the classroom like a gunshot. Sunho's small body flew sideways from the force of the blow, and he crashed into a desk before falling to the floor. Blood immediately began flowing from his split lip, and his left cheek was already starting to swell. The little boy tried to crawl away from the alien commander, but his movements were slow and unsteady from the impact. Commander Vexstar watched with amusement as Sunho struggled to get back on his feet. The other children pressed themselves against the walls, trying to become invisible outside the school building. Jinwoo felt something break inside his chest. The sound of that slap seemed to echo in his bones, and the sight of his little cousin bleeding on the classroom floor filled him with a rage he had never experienced before. His hands began to shake, but not from fear. The alien soldiers laughed at Sunho's pain, treating the injured child like entertainment. Lieutenant Crix made notes on his datapad, probably marking the boy for immediate disposal. The other children sobbed quietly, knowing they might be next. That was when Jinwoo stepped out from his hiding place behind the grain storage building. His young face was twisted with fury that burned hotter than the colony's twin suns. His feet moved forward almost without his conscious control, carrying him toward the school where the aliens were tormenting innocent children. Something fundamental was changing inside him as he walked across the dusty ground toward the classroom. The air around his body began to shimmer, like heat waves, and small pebbles near his feet started to vibrate in strange patterns. The boy who had been hiding in fear just moments before was becoming something else entirely. As Jinwoo walked toward the school building, something impossible began happening around him. The red dust beneath his feet started swirling in perfect circles that defied the natural wind patterns. The metal tools scattered around the colony began vibrating with a deep humming sound that seemed to come from inside the earth itself. Every step the young man took sent ripples through the air like stones dropped into still water. The electronic devices carried by the alien soldiers started malfunctioning, their screens flickering with strange symbols that hurt to look at directly. The plasma rifles that had seemed so threatening moments before began making warning sounds as their targeting systems failed. Commander Vexstar was still standing over little Sunho when he noticed the disturbance outside. Through the classroom windows he could see dust devils forming spontaneously in the perfectly calm air. The alien commander's yellow eyes narrowed as his enhanced senses detected energy readings that should not have been possible on this backward human colony. The reptilian being turned toward the doorway just as Jinwoo appeared in the entrance. The 16-year-old boy looked ordinary enough, still wearing his simple work clothes and showing no obvious weapons, but something about his presence made every alien in the room take an involuntary step backward. Lieutenant Crix was the first to recognize that something was seriously wrong. His compound eyes could detect electromagnetic fields that were invisible to most other species, and what he saw around the human boy made his insect blood run cold. Waves of energy were radiating from Jinwoo's body in patterns that resembled the signatures of ancient weapons that could destroy entire star systems. Commander Vexstar, however, was too arrogant to believe that any human could pose a real threat. He had conquered dozens of species across the galaxy, and humans had always been among the weakest. His mouth curved into a cruel smile, showing all of his razor-sharp teeth. Another young pest wants to play hero, he hissed through his translator device. The alien commander raised his armored right hand, preparing to deliver the same kind of devastating blow that had sent Sunho flying across the room. But when Vexstar's fist descended toward Jinwoo's head, something that violated every law of physics occurred. The boy's left hand shot upward with impossible speed and caught the alien commander's wrist, stopping the attack completely. The impact should have shattered every bone in Jinwoo's arm. Instead, the sound of cracking came from Vexstar's supposedly indestructible armor. The shock on the alien commander's face was almost comical. He was a member of a species that had evolved on a world where the gravity was 3 times stronger than Earth's. His people could lift vehicles with their bare hands, and their bones were denser than most metals. Yet here was a human teenager holding his wrist as easily as if he were restraining a small child. Around the classroom, the other Federation soldiers raised their plasma rifles, but their weapons refused to function properly. The targeting computers kept showing error messages, and the energy cells began overheating in ways that should have been impossible. Several rifles simply shut down completely, while others started sparking and smoking. The air itself seemed to thicken around Jinwoo, as if reality was bending to accommodate forces that were not meant to exist in normal space. The boy's eyes began to change, becoming deeper and darker until they looked like windows into the vast emptiness between stars. Small points of light appeared in those depths, swirling like distant galaxies. "I told you not to hurt my family," Jinwoo said, and his voice carried harmonics that made every alien in the room feel sick to their stomachs. The words seemed to come from multiple dimensions at once, creating echoes that lingered long after he stopped speaking. Commander Vexstar tried desperately to pull his arm free, but found that he might as well have been trying to move a mountain. The boy's grip was not just strong, it was absolutely immovable, as if his hand had become part of the fundamental structure of the universe. The alien commander's armor continued to crack under pressure that defied every scientific principle throughout the colony. Other humans began experiencing their own strange awakenings. Mayor Hyunwoo felt knowledge flooding into his mind, ancient memories that belonged to his species but had been locked away for countless generations. He suddenly understood technologies that were beyond anything the Federation possessed and could see the true history of humanity stretching back through geological ages. Minji, who was hiding in her family's house, felt power flowing through her hands like electricity. The walls around her began glowing with soft light, and she realized she could see through matter itself, peering into the molecular structure of everything around her. The simple farming tools in their shed started rearranging themselves into complex patterns that served purposes she was only beginning to understand outside. In the town square, Farmer Taeyong discovered that he could communicate directly with the planet's ecosystem. The alien scanner devices scattered around the area began registering impossible readings as plants throughout the colony started growing at accelerated rates. Flowers bloomed out of season, and the grain in the storage silos began multiplying beyond what the containers could hold. The awakening spread from person to person like a chain reaction. Each human who remembered their true nature triggered the same response in others nearby. The psychic dampening field that had kept humanity docile for millennia was dissolving like morning mist under the heat of their collective rage. Lieutenant Crix frantically tried to contact the Federation battle cruiser orbiting high above the planet, but his communications equipment was producing only static. His forearms moved rapidly over his control panels, but every system he tried to activate either failed completely or began displaying data that made no sense. According to known science, deep in the archives of the Federation flagship, automated systems began accessing files that had been classified at the highest levels for thousands of years. Ancient records flickered to life on computer screens throughout the ship, showing images that the current generation of aliens had never been allowed to see. The files contained warnings written in dozens of extinct languages, all telling the same terrifying story. Humanity was not a primitive species that had evolved naturally on Earth. They were the descendants of beings so powerful that the entire galaxy had conspired to hide them away. The planet Earth was not their prison, it was their sanctuary designed to give other species time to develop without competition. The record showed images of humans in gleaming armor standing over the surrendered fleets of species that would later found the Galactic Federation. Their eyes burned with the same starlight that was now visible in Jinwoo's gaze, and their presence warped space itself around them. These ancient humans had been called many names by the species they encountered. The first ones, the Star-Touched, the Voidwalkers, but most commonly they were simply known as the ancestors, the original rulers of the galaxy who had chosen to withdraw from galactic politics and live quietly among the stars. They had created the dampening field around Earth, not to imprison themselves, but to give their children a chance to grow up in peace while the rest of the universe learned to govern itself. Now, after thousands of years of enforced sleep, that protection was failing and humanity was beginning to remember what they truly were. Commander Vexstar felt his bones starting to crack under the impossible pressure of Jinwoo's grip. The boy's face showed no emotion at all as he held the alien commander suspended in mid-air. His voice, when he spoke again, seemed to come from the depths of space itself. You made a mistake coming here. The transformation of Jinwoo reached its peak as the last barriers in his genetic memory dissolved completely. His grip on Commander Vexstar's wrist tightened further, and the alien leader's supposedly indestructible armor began crumbling like old paper. The reptilian being's yellow eyes bulged with terror as he realized he was completely helpless in the hands of what he had thought was just a primitive human child. Around the classroom, the other Federation soldiers tried desperately to escape, but found their legs would not obey their commands. The energy radiating from Jinwoo had created a field that interfered with their nervous systems, making coordinated movement impossible. Their plasma rifles had become useless chunks of overheated metal, and their communication devices were producing only static filled with whispers and languages that predated their civilization. Jean lifted Commander Vexstar off the ground with one hand holding the alien commander's massive body at eye level as if he weighed nothing at all. The boy's face showed no emotion, but his voice carried the sound of stellar winds and dying stars when he spoke. Again, you wanted to see real power, he said, and each word seemed to resonate through multiple dimensions at once. Let me show you what your Federation has been hiding from. The air around them began to shimmer and twist as reality itself bent to accommodate forces that should not have existed in normal space. Through the distortion, other scenes became visible, like windows into different parts of the galaxy on distant worlds. Other human colonies were experiencing the same awakening as news of Colony 7's transformation spread through quantum channels that operated faster than light and knew. Sol, a farming world, 3-star systems. Away, human colonists who had been loading tribute cargo onto Federation ships suddenly stopped what they were doing. Their eyes began glowing with the same starlight visible in Jinwoo's gaze and the alien. Overseers found their weapons turning to dust in their hands. The human farmers did not attack their oppressors. Instead, they simply looked at the Federation soldiers with expressions of profound sadness. The aliens felt their minds being gently touched by intelligence so vast that it made them feel like insects trying to understand mathematics. Their ship systems began shutting down one by one, not from damage, but because the technology itself was becoming incompatible with the transformed. Humans present. Similar scenes were playing out across dozens of human settlements. The psychic resonance of Jinwoo's awakening was triggering genetic memories in every person of human descent throughout the galaxy. The dampening field that had kept their abilities suppressed for millennia was dissolving like ice in summer heat. In Colony 7 itself, the transformation continued to spread and intensify. Farmer Taeyong discovered that he could reshape matter at the molecular level, turning sand into perfect crystals. With a thought, his wife Nayeon found that she could see through time itself, watching probability streams branch out into infinite possible futures. Young Mother Gina realized she could communicate with the quantum vacuum that underlies all reality, asking it to create whatever she needed from pure energy. Her twin babies, who were barely old enough to walk, began floating in the air, surrounded by halos of soft light, their innocent minds completely untroubled by abilities that would have driven adult aliens insane with fear. The children throughout the colony were adapting to their awakened state faster than the adults. Little Sunho, who had been bleeding on the classroom floor just minutes before, was now sitting up and smiling as his injuries healed themselves. His small hands glowed with gentle warmth that repaired not just his own body, but also restored the damaged furniture around him. Miss Ga, the young teacher, found that she could share knowledge directly through mental contact. Her students suddenly understood mathematics and science at levels that surpassed most Federation scholars, but more importantly, they retained their essential humanity, the kindness and creativity that made their species unique throughout the settled galaxy. Federation command centers began receiving frantic reports from their field units. Human colonies that had been producing tribute for decades were suddenly impossible to control. The humans were not fighting back in any conventional sense. Instead, they were simply existing in ways that made normal technology stop working. Captain Zoran aboard the battle cruiser Dominant Victory watched helplessly as his ship continued to malfunction. Every system designed to harm living beings was shutting down permanently, while life support and navigation remained functional. It was as if the humans were making a clear distinction between defensive and offensive capabilities. The ancient files still scrolling across his screen showed him why this had happened before. During humanity's first withdrawal from galactic affairs, they had not destroyed the Federation fleets that opposed them. Instead, they had simply made it impossible for those ships to cause harm, while leaving them perfectly capable of returning home safely. It was a form of mercy so profound that most species could not even comprehend it. The humans could have easily destroyed every Federation vessel in the galaxy, but instead they chose to disable only their weapon systems. The message was clear but gentle. We will not allow you to hurt others, but we will not hurt you either. Lieutenant Crix finally managed to establish communication with the Federation Supreme Command, but the response he received made his insect blood run cold. Emergency Protocol 7 had been activated for the first time in recorded history. This was the contingency plan created by the founding species who remembered the ancient Warzal Federation. Forces were ordered to withdraw immediately from human space with no exceptions. The Supreme Council had decided that attempting to fight the awakened humans would result in the complete destruction of galactic civilization, not through malice, but simply because the power difference was too great to comprehend. Back in the classroom, Commander Vexstar felt his bones beginning to crack under the impossible pressure of Jinwoo's grip, but he also noticed something unexpected. The boy was being very careful not to cause permanent damage. The alien commander's armor was being crushed, but his actual body was being protected by the same forces that were destroying his equipment. This realization brought a new kind of terror. Jinwoo was not trying to kill him, he was demonstrating restraint while showing off power that could have erased the entire Federation fleet from existence. The human boy was teaching him a lesson rather than seeking revenge. Please, Commander Vexstar gasped, his voice barely audible through his damaged translator. We did not know the archives were classified. We thought you were just another primitive species that needed. Guidanse. Jinwoo's expression softened slightly as he looked down at his little cousin. Sunho the child was now completely healed and was experimenting with his own awakened abilities, making small flowers bloom in the cracks of the classroom floor. The sight of innocent wonder on the boy's face seemed to remind Jinwoo of who he truly was. Beneath all the cosmic power we know, you did not understand, he said, and his voice had returned to something closer to human, though it still carried harmonics that made the aliens nervous. Your species is young and you are still learning how to interact with others, but ignorance is not an excuse for cruelty around them. The other Federation soldiers had stopped trying to escape and were instead staring in amazement at what was happening. The human children were sharing their awakened abilities, creating small miracles throughout the classroom. Broken toys were repairing themselves, wilted plants were blooming again, and the air itself seemed cleaner and more alleviating. Aliens were witnessing something that their military training had never prepared them for. They were seeing power used not for conquest or domination, but for healing and creation. The humans could have killed them all in seconds. Instead, they were demonstrating what true strength looked like when guided by wisdom and compassion. Commander Vexstar realized that he was not just being defeated, he was being educated. The humans were showing him, and by extension the entire Federation, what they could have learned if they had approached first contact with curiosity instead of arrogance. High above Colony 7, in the cold darkness of space, the Federation battle cruiser Dominant Victory suddenly found itself in serious trouble. Every system on the massive warship began failing simultaneously as waves of unknown energy washed over it. From the planet below, the ship's artificial intelligence started accessing classified files that should have been impossible to reach. Captain Zoran, a veteran of 50 military campaigns, felt his blood turn to ice as ancient records appeared on his command screens. These were documents that only the Supreme Council was supposed to see, files so secret that most Federation officers did not even know they existed. The images and data streaming across his monitors told a story that challenged everything he thought he knew about galactic history. The files revealed that humanity had not evolved naturally on the planet Earth. Instead, they were the descendants of a species so terrifyingly powerful that the entire galaxy had worked together to contain them. Millions of years ago, these ancient humans had not been conquered or destroyed. They had simply chosen to withdraw from galactic affairs and live quietly on a single world. The records showed battles that had taken place before any current species had achieved space travel. Humans in armor that seemed to be made of condensed starlight, standing victorious over fleets of ships from dozens of different worlds. Their weapons could tear holes in space itself, and their mere presence caused reality to bend around them in impossible ways. Captain Zoran scrolled through tactical reports written by his own species' ancestors, describing encounters with beings they called the Void Touched. One report detailed how a single human had destroyed an entire battle fleet by simply looking at it. The weapon's fire had passed through the human like he was made of mist, and then every ship in the fleet had imploded simultaneously. Another file showed communication logs from a diplomatic mission that had gone horribly wrong. The Federation ancestors had tried to negotiate with the humans, demanding that they submit to galactic authority. The human representative had listened politely to their demands and then casually reached out and crushed the Federation flagship with his bare hands while it was still in orbit around their homeworld. The most terrifying record was a video file that showed the final battle between the Federation forces and the human empire. The aliens had assembled the largest military force in galactic history, bringing together every species and every weapon they possessed. The battle had lasted exactly 17 minutes. Humans had not even used weapons in any sense that the Federation understood. Instead, they had simply willed their enemies to stop existing. Ships vanished from reality, leaving no trace behind. Entire planets were moved out of their orbits and relocated to different star systems. Some Federation forces found themselves transported instantly across the galaxy and abandoned in empty space, but the most shocking part of the records was how the war had ended. The humans had not destroyed their enemies or enslaved them. Instead, they had simply announced that they were tired of ruling the galaxy and wanted to live in peace. They had created a barrier around their homeworld and withdrawn from all contact with other species. The barrier was not a prison, but a gift to the rest of the galaxy. It dampened the natural abilities of any humans born within it, allowing their children to grow up as normal people while the other species had time to develop their own civilizations without interference. The humans had essentially volunteered to limit themselves so that everyone else could have a chance to thrive. Now, as Captain Zoran watched his instruments, he realized that something had gone catastrophically wrong. The energy readings from Colony 7 matched the signatures described in the ancient files. The dampening field was failing, and humanity was beginning to remember what they truly were down on the planet's surface. The awakening continued to spread through the human population like wildfire. Each person who recovered their ancestral memories triggered the same response in others nearby. The process was not violent or destructive. Instead, it felt like waking up from a very long dream. Grandmother Suna, who had been crying in the alien cage, suddenly stood up straight. Her elderly body was still frail, but her eyes now held depths that seemed to contain entire universes. She looked at the metal bars holding her prisoner, and they simply ceased to exist. The cage did not break or melt, it just stopped being real. The other humans trapped with her stared in amazement as their own powers began manifesting. Young Baker Kiwan discovered that he could manipulate time itself, slowing down the seconds around him until he could walk between raindrops without getting wet. His wife Gina found that she could see through the quantum foam that underlies all matter, understanding the true structure of reality at its most fundamental level. Throughout the colony, similar awakenings were happening everywhere. Teacher Miss Ga realized she could communicate directly with the minds of her students, sharing knowledge instantly without the need for words. Farmer Taeyang learned that he could speak to the planet itself, asking the soil to produce whatever crops were needed. But perhaps the most dramatic change was happening to Mayor Hyun-woo. The elderly leader felt memories flooding back that stretched across geological time. He remembered when his ancestors had first arrived in this galaxy millions of years ago, bringing order to the chaos. They found there had been no malice in their conquest. They had simply been so far advanced that other species seemed like children in comparison. The ancient humans had tried to guide the younger races, helping them develop technology and philosophy, but their very presence had stifled growth. The other species became dependent on human guidance, never learning to think for themselves or solve their own problems. It was like adults trying to teach children who never had the chance to make their own mistakes. So the humans had made the hardest choice possible. They had voluntarily given up their power and isolated themselves, allowing the galaxy to develop naturally. The dampening field around Earth was their greatest act of love, a sacrifice that let billions of other beings grow and thrive without interference. Now that sacrifice was ending, the field had been designed to fail if humans were ever seriously threatened, triggering an awakening that would restore their abilities. It was a failsafe built by ancestors who hoped it would never be needed, but who wanted to protect their children if the galaxy ever turned against them. Lieutenant Crix frantically worked at his communication equipment, trying to send a warning to the Federation command. His insect senses could detect energy levels that were climbing beyond anything his instruments could measure. The very air around the human colony was beginning to glow with power that could reshape matter at the atomic level, but his messages were not getting through. Every transmission was being blocked by interference that seemed to come from the humans themselves. They were not trying to jam his communications, they were simply existing in a way that made normal technology impossible to use. The revelation was spreading beyond just the awakened humans. Every alien device on the planet was beginning to access the classifiers stored in their memory banks. The truth about humanity was being broadcast directly into their electronic systems by forces that operated outside normal space and time. Commander Vexstar felt his armor continuing to crack under Jinwoo's impossible grip. The boy's eyes had become windows into deep space filled with swirling galaxies and dying stars. The alien commander could see his own reflection in those cosmic depths, and what he saw there terrified him more than any weapon ever could. He saw himself as he truly was, a primitive creature playing with forces he could never understand. The Federation had built their empire on the sleeping bodies of giants, and now those giants were beginning to stir. The age of alien dominance was ending before it had even truly begun. In the growing light emanating from Jinwoo's transformed body, Commander Vexstar finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. The humans had never been a conquered species. They had been sleeping gods who had chosen to dream of simpler lives, and now something had awakened them from that ancient slumber. Instead of crushing Commander Vexstar completely, Jinwoo made a choice that would echo through galactic history for countless generations. The boy gently lowered the alien commander to the ground, setting him down as carefully as if he were placing a fragile flower. The reptilian being's armor was completely shattered, but his body was unharmed, though he trembled like a leaf in a storm. The power that had been radiating from Jinwoo began to settle into a more controlled form, though it never fully disappeared. His eyes returned to their normal human appearance, but they still held depths that seemed to contain entire star systems. The air around him stopped shimmering, but everyone in the room could feel the vast forces that lay just beneath the surface. Go back to your Federation, Jinwoo said quietly, his voice carrying absolute authority despite his youth. Tell them that humanity remembers now. Tell them the age of conquest is over, but we offer something better than war. We offer partnership between equals. Commander Vexstar tried to speak, but only managed a weak croak. His throat felt raw, as if he had been screaming, though he had barely made a sound. The alien commander nodded, frantically unable to form words in the face of power that dwarfed anything he had ever encountered around the classroom. The other Federation soldiers slowly began to move again as Jinwoo's energy field released its hold on their nervous systems. They gathered what remained of their equipment, with shaking hands, their faces showing a mixture of terror and awe. Lieutenant Crix helped his commander to his feet while constantly glancing at the human boy, who had humbled their entire force without breaking a sweat. The children throughout the classroom were also returning to something closer to normal, though the changes in them were permanent. Little Sunho ran to his cousin and hugged Jinwoo's legs, his small face bright with joy and wonder. The other students gathered around their teacher, Miss Jie, who was struggling to process everything that had happened outside the school building. The transformation of Colony 7 continued, but in a more peaceful direction. The humans who had awakened their ancestral memories were learning to control their abilities rather than being overwhelmed by them. Grandmother Suna was teaching the younger colonists how to reshape matter without accidentally destroying things they cared about. Farmer Taeyong was showing others how to communicate with the planet's ecosystem, asking the soil and plants to work together in harmony. His wife, Naeun, used her ability to see through time to help plan crops that would thrive in future weather patterns, ensuring the colony would never face hunger. Again, Mayor Hyunwoo stood in the town square, addressing the gathering crowd of colonists. His elderly body still looked frail, but his voice carried the wisdom of ages as he explained what was happening to them. The genetic locks that had kept humanity docile were opening one by one, restoring abilities that had been dormant for millions of years. The mayor helped everyone understand that they were not becoming something different. They were simply remembering what they had always been beneath the surface. The dampening field had not changed their essential nature. It had only hidden their true potential while they learned to be human in the deepest sense of the word. Above them in space, the Federation battle cruiser Dominant Victory was preparing for emergency departure. Captain Zoran had received direct orders from the Supreme Council to withdraw immediately and make no further contact with human settlements. The ancient protocols were being activated across the galaxy as the Federation leadership struggled to adapt to a completely changed universe. The classified files that had been unlocked were now being transmitted to every Federation world, along with new diplomatic guidelines. The humans were not to be treated as a subject species. They were to be approached as the elder race that they had always been. Tribute payments were cancelled immediately, and all human slaves were ordered released. Captain Zoran watched through his ship's sensors as the energy readings from Colony 7 began to stabilize. The humans were not preparing for war, they were simply existing in their awakened state while going about their daily lives. The power that could have destroyed his entire fleet was being used to repair damaged buildings and help crops grow. This restraint was perhaps more terrifying than any display of destructive force could have been. It showed that the humans had evolved far beyond the need for conquest or revenge. They were operating on a level of consciousness that made them genuinely alien despite their familiar appearance. Down on the planet's surface, the Federation soldiers were making their way back to their transport ship under the watchful eyes of the colonists. Commander Vexstar walked slowly, his legs still shaky from his encounter with Jinwoo. The alien commander kept glancing back at the school where the human boy stood surrounded by laughing children. Lieutenant Crix helped load their damaged equipment while trying to understand what had just happened to them. His insect mind was logical and analytical, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for beings who wielded cosmic forces with the casual ease of children playing with toys. The Federation transport lifted off in emergency departure mode, leaving behind clouds of superheated dust and the lingering smell of overloaded electronics. The aliens were fleeing not from violence, but from the realization that everything they thought they knew about the universe had been wrong. As the ship disappeared into the purple sky, the colonists of Settlement 7 stood together in their town square looking up at the stars with new understanding. They were still the same people who had struggled to grow crops in alien soil and worried about making ends meet, but now they carried within them the knowledge of what they truly were. Mayor Yunwoo placed a gentle hand on Jinwoo's shoulder and asked the question that was on everyone's mind. What happens now, son? The old man's eyes held new depths that reflected wisdom stretching back through geological ages, but his voice was still warm and grandfatherly. Jinwoo looked up at the stars where he could sense other human colonies experiencing their own awakenings. The psychic dampening field around Earth was dissolving like morning mist, and humanity's scattered children were remembering their birthright among the stars. The galaxy was about to discover what it meant to have truly awakened humans as neighbors instead of subjects. Now we go home, he said simply, and we help our galaxy become what it was always meant to be. Words carried promise rather than threat. The humans would not seek to dominate or control other species. Instead, they would guide them toward a future where every race could develop their full potential. The age of conquest was ending, but the age of cooperation was just beginning. Above them, the stars themselves seemed to pulse in acknowledgement, welcoming back